Good morning. Welcome to the next session of Job Preparedness, job postings and cover letters. So I'll talk about job postings and then I'm going to hand things over to Erin to talk about cover letters. I'm really excited to have Erin here today. She reviewed and I think helped hire a bunch of people. I'm sure you'll get into this, Erin, but at her previous job, she helped hire people and she looked over a lot of cover letters. So she's got great advice for us. And then Patrick is here to help with our pairing session at the end. And of course, Patrick, feel free to, if I say something and you're like, oh, I have a great story or great piece of advice based on what Lindsay or Erin is saying, just hop in. That would be great. So I want to talk about reading job postings. This sounds weird. It sounds like it would be obvious and easy to read job postings. I find that for developer job postings, it's not. And I know Luis and Sismita were with me on a call last week and we were working on resumes and we kind of got into this. But there's a lot of weird things that come up on developer job postings that you kind of have to read in between the lines and figure out what's most important, what is someone asking for. So we'll talk about that today a little bit. So this is what I feel like when I'm reading over most developer job postings. I love this GIF, so good. It's generally pretty bad. I think a lot of times that somebody who is not a developer is handed a list of things to write a job posting, and they don't exactly know what the job is or what the technology is, and they're required to write this job posting for their company, and it ends up not making complete sense. So that handoff, I think, happens at a lot of companies, or even not to a person, it might happen to a robot, and the robot creates this job posting. It doesn't make sense, and that's why it's hard to read. A lot of job postings end up asking for someone that I like to call a unicorn. So what is a unicorn, you ask? It's someone who can do everything from back-end development to QA testing to accessibility to design to Adobe Photoshop, write perfect CSS. It's somebody who probably doesn't really exist, that no one can be good at all of those things. It's very, very unlikely that you're good at all of those things. So some job postings, a lot of job postings ask for this unicorn person that is unrealistic, I think. So that's my first point of today. So let's look at a job posting and see what we can learn from it. Great. So this is the Google Career Center. I was looking for front end. I searched for front end, and this is some of the results I got. I got 252 results for front end. The wording for looking for jobs in web development is actually also hard. I've never referred to myself as an engineer, but I guess I could. That's a way I could refer to myself. I've always thought of myself as a web developer. So you could search for web developer, engineer, front end, back end, developer. There's a lot of things that you should be searching for when you're looking for a job. That's just one half of it. Everybody calls themselves different things, and every role is called something different at a different company. It means something completely different. So front-end software engineer at Google might mean something completely different at Amazon. It just depends. It's whatever the company deems. So that's just one thing I wanted to mention. But let's see. Oh, here we go. Okay. So I want to read over the minimum qualifications here. So it says a BA or BS in computer science. I actually was skimming this and I thought that they only wrote this, and I didn't read that they actually also wrote or related field or equivalent practical experience. I was just like, oh, another place that requires a computer science degree unnecessarily. But they do actually write that or equivalent practical experience. I still think it could be written better. Why is this still first? That's okay, but at least they didn't write that a minimum qualification is a BS or a BA in computer science, because I think we all know that this is unnecessary. If you can do the work, if you've done projects in the languages, there's no reason you need a degree in computer science to do web development. So I don't love it when companies do that, and I would tell you to also ignore this if a company has this as a requirement, unless it's I don't know, like a research position at a company to do performance, but maybe you've researched and you feel like you know enough about performance to help a company in that way. I wouldn't, but maybe that's where you want to go and work towards. But just keep that in mind. Like that's the only reason I could see a BS or BA in computer science being required. 1 year of work experience. So that's nice that so most places will write like 2 to 3. You almost never see 1 year of experience. It's like, I think it's very rare to see 1 year of experience that somebody wants. They always want someone who's 2 to 5 years. Like I never see this year of one number. But I would say again, I always ignore the years of experience. I look for the title. I see if they write like senior or mid-level or anything like that, like lead software engineer. And then I look through what they're asking about the job. The years of experience is an easy way for them to get you to back off of a job posting. So don't do that. Don't let this deter you from applying somewhere, because it generally means nothing. If you can do the work, you can do the work. And 1 to 5 years of experience, depending on the person, means completely different things. So I would say generally ignore the years of experience unless it's above like 10 years, and then maybe they really want someone senior. But again, read over the job listing and see what else it says. So this says minimum qualifications experience in JavaScript and 1 or more programming languages included, but not limited to Java, C++, Python, or Go. And then experience with front-end technologies and or front-end frameworks. Okay. Let me go down to my notes. So then we get to the next section, which is preferred qualifications, which...
Lindsay, can I make a comment on the minimum qualifications?
Go for it.
A lot of places that I've worked, I think it's wise to overlook most of these because one, as someone who, who has to create job descriptions, a lot of times they're kind of reaching in the dark. Who is this kind of person that I'm looking for? So here are some maybe key attributes of who I'm looking for. It doesn't mean that is exactly who they're looking for. But another thing is some companies actually put their job descriptions or their open positions through software that essentially indicates here's the pay scale that I want for this position based on what I'm requiring. And sometimes the manager will say, well, okay, what I wrote, you're telling me that's going to be, I don't know, I'm going to throw out a number, $30,000 a year. But I know that what I need is, in order to get the best person, is a $50,000 a year salary range, something like that. So what do I need to get there? Well, I need to have at least X amount of experience, and those are just based on their programming. So it really doesn't actually mean you have to have those things. Sometimes it's really more for internal purposes that they might put those things in there.
So they're using it as a way to like organize, oh yeah, this job posting is for that part of our organization. So it's not even for the applicant, it's for that.
Exactly. It justifies why they want to pay you what they want to pay you sometimes.
Okay, that is good to know. Yeah. So again, going down to these preferred qualifications, like you'll see this in a lot of job postings where it's like required qualifications and like good to haves, or like they'll do like that degree of headings in a lot of job postings. I hate it because it means like these are what we're saying is required, which normally I would say to take more like as important than the nice to haves. But maybe they forgot like the order of the headings. They just like spit out everything into different headings. Like it doesn't, I don't think people do a good job with this. So here we've got experience developing user-facing software, experience with the latest and greatest web standards, including HTML5 and CSS3. Why wouldn't you write this up here with this front-end technologies and front-end frameworks, along with this other bullet point here that's more specific about Angular, Polymer, Clojure, Backbone? Like those 2 bullets would have fit nicely up here, kind of makes sense. Why are they in the other section? This is my next favorite one, strong sense of web design and attuned to the fundamentals of user experience. This is starting to be a little bit of a unicorn person. Familiarity with the whole web stack. Now we're definitely a unicorn person, including protocols and web server optimization techniques. And then also an understanding of the principles of accessibility. So that's like, if you know everything, they'd love to have you. Great. So what do you get out of this job posting? There's like, a lot to go off of. I would say just try to weed out what seems most important. They said this experience in JavaScript is important, and they've repeated that here. They've said front end is important. That's in the job title. I would say that's important. The other stuff on here, the strong sense of web design, familiarity with the whole web stack, principles of accessibility, I would say those are all, like, if you don't have those things, you should apply for this job. It doesn't matter. These are just things that they spit out that they want the unicorn person. And I normally like to read this about job section, but Google, this is the same paragraph they put in like all their job postings, depending on if you're in the same like grouping of engineers. So the only thing that was different was this part, which is saying that you're building applications like Inbox, Gmail, Google Search. You will specialize in building responsive and elegant web applications that scale to users in dozens of different languages. So they didn't say anything about responsive here. I mean, I guess it's kind of assumed nowadays, but that's nice to know. Like, if you have responsive web experience, that is apparently something you'll be doing. And then down here is the responsibility section, which I think is the most helpful. Design, develop, test, deploy, maintain, and improve software. They can't tell you which kind. They don't tell you what language, but at least you kind of know what you're going to be doing at the job. And then manage individual project priority. That means nothing. So I don't think this is a well-written job posting. You really have to weed through it. I would say if you're interested in doing this kind of work, and it sounds like if you can figure out what this job is doing and you want to apply, you should, or don't figure out what the job is about and just apply, because Google will figure out. I think their recruiters will look at your profile and say, actually, I think you meant to apply for this job. It's actually more suited to your skill set. So the recruiters at Google, I think, do a lot of that kind of stuff. And at bigger companies, they have recruiters who know the job postings better than anyone. Yeah, Patrick, what's the recruiter process like? Because I know at one point you had applied to Google, and if you could talk about that, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, two things. Just like the first thing before I forget. Sometimes when you land on these like bigger companies that don't have job descriptions that are written by folks who are intimately familiar with that role's responsibilities, just like Lindsay mentioned, like the titles can get kind of like just weird. Like sometimes these titles don't necessarily mean what what the role is. And I've found it most helpful to search for specific skills or languages that I know would surface the right types of jobs. So like I'll literally go to some of these bigger companies and just search for HTML, JavaScript, and like see what comes back, because usually that's a little bit of a better search than just kind of looking to figure out what job title I might be interested in. I think like the biggest takeaway from all of that experience for me was two things. One, when you go to interview at a place, it is as much an interview of you to find out if they want you to work there, as it is of you interviewing them to find out if you actually want to be there. So I think we'll probably talk about that a little bit later. But you know, that's always like a good thing to keep in mind. Like if you aren't like having a good conversation, it's as much of a vetting process for you as it is for them. And the second thing is like, if you get into a situation where you're doing sort of a technical exercise with somebody, it is good to sort of get into that mindset of like at least explaining what you're thinking and why you're doing certain things. And we could talk about technical interviews a little bit later too. But like just kind of keeping that in mind too, because often I think these places want to see how you're thinking about problems. It's not necessarily like about the right answer all the time. They kind of want to see like how you're thinking about things, how you're approaching things, how you'd work with things. So like having some back and forth with the interviewer is helpful too.
Thank you, Patrick. I'm going to breeze through these next couple ones because I want to get to Erin's content, but I think there are things we all went over. So again, don't let years of experience, certain necessary or required skills, or minimum qualifications or degrees stop you from applying somewhere. Just read it between those lines, try to figure out what the job's about. And again, if it sounds interesting, go for it. Job postings often aren't written well, as we discussed. They can be handed to a robot, or they can just be for a company's internal purposes, or they can be handed to an HR person who doesn't know how to write the job posting. There's all different reasons why it's not written well. And the last thing that I like to do sometimes is you can actually learn, you should take it with a grain of salt, but learn about a company's culture from their posting. So a lot of times you'll see, like with small startups, they'll write about their benefits at the bottom of the job posting, and it'll say like, we have really good healthcare, and also the keg of beer in the office, and a ping pong table. And like, I'm like, well, it's not a benefit to me. So it's interesting that you would mention that. Like, what kind of culture do you have? So I'd go into interviews thinking about that and making sure it's like the right culture for me. But if the benefits talk about like a great maternity leave and like career growth benefits and stuff like that, like those are things that I like, and I can see the values coming through in their job posting even. And again, take it with a grain of salt, because they might have not written everything, but you can learn a lot about a company's culture and values sometimes from the job postings, and especially from that benefits section, like the things that they think are going to benefit you. Sometimes it's interesting, like a beer keg generally won't benefit people, but it's written about a lot on job postings. So just something that I've noticed. And lastly, soft skills. I've been working for years to try to figure out another way to say this, because I hate soft skills. They're really important. They're crucial skills that make you a better human, a better teammate, a better developer, all these things. They're things that include communication, writing, you're self-motivated, humility, but Erin I think she's going to make a point about, your adjectives and being careful sometimes. Later, I don't know if that's coming later, Erin, or you can say it now. But yeah, it's coming later. It's good. So I do think they're important, and these will come across in interviews, or if you can, work some of these into your cover letter, just about who you are and what you value, and how you're a really hard worker. Like, that's never going to be a bad thing. And then this is a really nice quote that I'm going to read quickly from a woman who used to run some tech organization for women in Philadelphia, and then she took her blog down. I don't know why. She had really good stuff, but I got the article, I kept it. So it says, if you have the curiosity, the communication skills, the interest, the enthusiasm, the tenacity, and you actually care, you can learn just about any front-end dev language you want. I think a lot of companies know this, so keep that in mind. It means you can learn anything, and you can be a great developer with these skills. And the soft skills are the ones that will keep you progressing as technology changes, and will make you enjoyable to work with. They're the ones that will keep the clients happy and will help ensure you don't burn out. This is so true. This is true of every job in the world, but we don't recognize it that often. The soft skills are like, technology is changing every year, and we meet to grow with it. If you can learn quickly, that's really important. But you need to be able to work with your team or work with a client. You're always working with someone at some level. So I think being a part of that and having that in your skill set is one of the most important things you can have.
So we're going to talk about cover letters. I'm going to be honest. When Lindsay approached me about this, my first thought was, I hate cover letters. From both a writing perspective as an applicant, and also from a hiring perspective. So when you review a lot of resumes, cover letters are exhausting and sometimes boring. When you're applying for a lot of jobs, cover letters are exhausting and boring, because you're trying to reiterate the same skills that you've maybe reiterated in your resume. You might have reiterated in, depending on how long the application process is and what all they ask you in that process, you might feel like, well, I've already told you everything. Like, sometimes they're asking so many questions, you feel like you've given them your whole life story in the application itself. But there are some very crucial things with cover letters that I think are important to remember. So some of the biggest things are that it really just sets you apart. Your resume might look almost identical to someone else's. Your job experience could look identical to someone else's. But what won't show up on those that shows up even more clearly is how well you can communicate ideas and just communicate in general. How you express yourself. Things that you do well that other candidates might not, or even just kind of how you approach the world shows up a little bit, and is very helpful for hiring managers. I've read cover letters where I was like, this person, it'll even say things like, this person doesn't understand what this job is, but do they know, and going back to Lindsay's point, maybe the job description was written poorly. So reading through it, what are they telling you? What are they communicating about themselves? It can help you determine if they're actually a good fit to come in for an interview. So the pain is worth it, is the bottom line. How do I advance? There we go. So a couple big points for cover letters. You don't want to recycle your cover letters. You can reuse parts. So you'll want to have some key sections of every cover letter that you do, but if you are recycling your cover letters, you're going to miss things like, what is the title of the job? Maybe even for me at some points, it was, what industry am I in? I've gone from, my career's kind of focused on digital marketing, project management, and product management. So kind of a whole array, and that can fit in several areas in an organization. So you don't want to just say like, for a developer, it could be, I'm interested in, let's say you say you're interested in web development, or you're interested in a career in an IT department, because sometimes web development is there, or digital something. There are lots of ways that you might address it depending on the company that you don't want to have as a general statement for every application. So it's really important to just have those building blocks. It also keeps you from being lazy. And what I mean by lazy is, if you're just taking your building blocks and crafting a new thing, you're going to be paying attention to some of the details. What's important to this company that's not important to another one? And doing a find and replace, you can't do that. It's also, in order to understand what's important to the company, you want to get an idea of the company from the website. You want to, if they have a blog, that is, I think, the best place, because it talks, the blog is going to speak to you in the way that the company speaks internally the most. This is where they're going to present their personality to you. Sometimes the rest of the website, it gives you an idea of who they are, what they value, how they work, but it might be written in a little more of a formal way. So this gives you a better idea of how do they like to talk. And when you learn that, it tells you how you should talk to them. So at one place I worked, they would talk a lot about matching emotion for emotion. So basically in this context, that means understanding, like Sparkbox, we're very conversational, friendly, collaborative. You can see that in our writing. You can see that we value learning and that we value discovery in the way we write. We're less focused on the window dressing than we are on the content. Some places you can tell are very focused on the window dressing, on being very proper and very formal and documenting. And that might change your approach. It might also change whether you want to apply there. The next point really is to make sure you can do your best to find out who you should be addressing the cover letter to. This is a good reason to not go through Indeed or things like that if you have the option to, as the other folks said, to apply on the websites. You might, on the actual company website, you might find out who the hiring manager is on that website, but you might not on Indeed, because Indeed has a very specific format. This has actually been a struggle for me because in the postings I've looked at over time, you often can't find out who's hiring. So Lindsay has in the past talked about addressing the company or just being a little more personable and not using the to whom it may concern or dear hiring manager. Like those work, but they, when you're reading a lot of these, it's like an automatic, it's like you've pushed a button that tells the hiring manager or whoever's reading these to tune out. It's very interesting because it's so rote. They start, even if they don't intend to, they're kind of already put you in a box. So being conversational about how you start the letter is very important. When you're learning about the company, it's also going to tell you like what they value. So what maybe you need to pull out more in your blocks of what you've written to speak directly to them. Spell check and grammar. You always want to spell check. That is crucial for what you're doing. I can't tell you how many times I've read through things and thought this person was awesome, but there's some little thing about they either didn't spell check. I've worked under some editors in the past, so things like they weren't consistent about the way they did things. If they used bullet points, did they make those sentences, or were they just phrases without a period? Did they do that consistently? Did they do that well? So those are things that you really want to look at. People aren't looking to, they're not looking to exclude you, but those things stand out even more when that's all they have to go on. So you want to be careful about those things. And don't just use the tools that are available in whatever word processing system you're using, that kind of thing. Reread it and read it fresh when you read it. You know, especially when it's in the kind of header of what you're looking for, just be very careful. I can't think of a great example in web that would apply to that, but it's just something you want to keep your eye out for.
Yeah, the inconsistencies in like how you write JavaScript is kind of, I've seen a lot of that where people like camel case or will do it differently throughout the whole paragraph, and you're like, it's none of these.
Yeah, exactly. And people like, when you're looking at the cover letter, especially for a job that needs to be detail oriented, if they're not consistent in the way they're writing this letter, are they consistent in the way they code? Are they detail oriented when they're working through a testing process, let's say? It gets extrapolated in the mind of the reader into a lot of different areas. So that's just important to keep in mind. Don't use colloquialisms, slang, swear words. You don't need to do a long form essay. This isn't a time to tell your life story or, be so formal you don't use like conjunctions, like I won't do this, or I couldn't do that. So you don't need to be super formal, but you also want to make sure that you're communicating clearly, communicating possibly to an audience that isn't as familiar with the full details of the job that you're doing. A lot of times these will be read by an HR person first or a recruiter first, that may or may not have full context for the industry. So the better you can do at explaining what you're saying for an average user, an average individual, the better off you'll be in the long run. Doesn't mean don't use acronyms. I know there's so many acronyms in technology and web development. Those are obviously acceptable. You just want to be careful about not exclusively speaking in those kind of terms. And find a buddy. That is a big deal because we can read through things, we can run our spell check, we can think through all those phrasing issues or how we want to communicate, but you might not catch them all because you wrote it. You spent a lot of time thinking about it. You're going to gloss over some things because you already know what you wrote. So having someone who's willing to look at that and just give you another set of eyes, tell you, hey, this phrase didn't quite make sense, or, I think what you meant was this, but it didn't quite come out that way. That's a big invaluable, really, in the long run. That can even be as simple as, it doesn't have to be someone in your field, I guess is what I'm thinking there. It could even be a parent, a partner, anyone like that basically they're just giving you this human check of, does this actually make sense? The last thing, and this is an area I don't have as much familiarity with, but I am very aware of it, is especially in the larger companies that you apply to, they will be using artificial intelligence of some kind to screen out applications. So you want to make sure this applies mostly to your resume, but it can be, they can and do screen your cover letters as well. So making sure that you address, don't repeat, but address some of the things that you're good at. So certain languages maybe that you're good at, or things that really stood out as strong requirements in the resume, or not in the resume, sorry, in the posting that you feel are important to address. Use some of those words. And I have in the email that we'll send you guys later, I don't think I put it in the presentation, there are several tools that can help you do this. They can literally take the job description that you're looking at applying for, and you can upload your resume and your cover letter and those things, and it'll give you a score to tell you how close you are. They'll make recommendations for what you might want to change to get a better match. Sometimes those things are paid services. In fact, a lot of them are. Some of them will give you a couple free tries. Others, another great resource for that kind of thing is check your public library. Public library offers a lot of free resources, and you can find that online. But they do a lot for job applicants. And so look there, see what they have available. They might not have anything, it just depends, but it never hurts to check it out. And I would do that way before I'd ever even consider paying for those. I think they're important and helpful, but see what you can find that is, unless you're, in a serious crunch, see what you can find that's free or just more easily available to you. How you can stand out. It isn't about you, but what you can do for the company. So when I'm looking at a job, at a application, I'm really thinking, I know what this role is. I know what I'm looking for, but I want to know how you can maybe even make it better. Because there's like a minimum of what you're looking for, but man, it'd be awesome if you had this kind of person. So when you give us why you'd be a good fit for the role, the skills that you have, the things that you care about, that gives me a better idea of where you'll fall. Because sometimes things don't make it into the posting that are really important. So your problem solving skills, let's say, that has been a big one for jobs I've been trying to hire for. People have the skills, the technical skills sometimes, but when they actually get in the door, if they actually get in the door, you might not see that they can problem solve the way you need them to be able to in order to take on the position. So it just, it really helps us to get a better sense of who you are. It also, like I said earlier, helps you stand out from your competition if you do it well, because it is so sometimes not fun to write the whole thing out and to rethink it every time. Definitely be concise. The cover letter is the thing that people, they want to see, but they also don't want to take a whole lot of time reading it. They'll probably skim it. And so just expect that. So make sure your key points are at, the heading, the first couple sentences of your paragraphs, so that you're really getting to the meat of what you're trying to say quickly. When you are trying to talk about why you're a good fit maybe for that company, you want to be able to show that you understand who the company is. On the flip side of that, and I don't say this to be scary, but if you don't understand something about what a company is saying about themselves, don't include it, because you might be totally wrong. And then that stands out more than not saying something about who the company is or what you understand they're looking for. And the last thing is kind of what Lindsay was talking about earlier, your soft skills. I also hate that word, mainly because I live my life in soft skills, but that's, you know, it is what it is. That's the way we term it. Those are hard things to communicate to somebody. So things like that you're a quick learner, you're a good cultural fit, you are a hard worker, you're loyal. I had a recruiter once tell me that if your qualifications are the same words you use to describe a dog, you need to look for other words. So sometimes it's not that the word itself is the problem. It's just that if you say, I'm a hard worker, well, that means different things to different people. If I say I'm loyal, that's great, but what makes you loyal? So it's basically saying, you know, we can gloss over these things at a high level, but let's give a little more detail or an illustration that helps us understand why you're loyal.
Just like a real quick note.
Yeah.
I find it really difficult to talk about myself in like these like glowing, like almost like boasting type of terms.
Mm-hmm.
That's like a personality fault, maybe. I don't know. But like it is definitely like a time to sort of like boost yourself up and think about like, you know what, I am good at these following things. These are the things that I'm really interested in and want to get better at. And like, just like Erin mentioned, like having a buddy to like double check and like sort of like seed them with that information before you like have them look at your cover letter. Just be like, hey, look, I know that I want to talk about myself in a certain way. Can you make sure that this sort of effectively communicates that? That can be like really helpful. So yeah, no, it might be a little bit of pressure to talk about yourself in that way, but like, yeah, it needs to be done to a certain degree.
Totally.
And you just actually made me think of Patrick. I know the apprentices get monthly reviews, and while I'm not saying you should only, you know, take the words of other people because you probably have a different impression of yourself, but some of those reviews are really, really nice, and you could reuse that wording. And if you're having trouble getting started, like use, because you have a couple months worth of reviews now, so those are good words to use to describe yourselves.
Yeah, and I've actually I have that same problem, Patrick. I don't, and I also don't want to come across to someone as like I know it all or I'm amazing. Like there's such a fine line there. You know, so some things I've done are to talk about what I'm passionate about, because that explains, you know, like I'm a detailed person, or I like to learn things. I'm passionate about this because X, Y, and Z. It allows you to talk about that strength of yours without being like, I'm an awesome communicator. No, I'm passionate about communicating because I've seen how it impacts people and our ability to do projects better, or, you know, however that looks for you. But when you can expound on it, it makes you feel a little less like you're gloating and a little more like, this is why, this is what's led me to care about this, that kind of thing.
Yeah, sure.
The other thing is, if you've had people consistently tell you in reviews that you are a star performer, you are, you know, you're, gosh, I can't even think of words anymore. You get, so I'll just gloss over that. You get some kind of consistent feedback. I do think it's okay to say, you know, coworkers or past supervisors have described me as X, Y, and Z. Especially when, you know they're going to be looking at references. I think when you say that, it gives them an idea that you're not saying like, you're not just the only authority on what you're good at. You're also pulling someone else in who's seen you maybe at your best and worst, because that happens on jobs, and can give that and has given that feedback honestly. So there are multiple sections for a cover letter. You want to cover things like why you're a good fit for the job. Like we talked about, that's hard and soft skills. And definitely this is a chance to highlight something from your resume that you couldn't go as in depth into. What you like about the company. It shows that you research them, that you understand who they are, that you have an idea of what they value. And again, like I said, this is the time to be accurate. If you don't feel like you can accurately express what you like about the company, it's fine to not say that. Don't throw something in because you feel like you have to. It's probably better to not include that if you don't feel like you know enough yet. And then maybe you say, instead of what you like about the company, some of the things you are interested in growing in your career, so that they can say, well, maybe that is a good fit for us, or maybe it's not. Conclude your cover letter by looking forward to the opportunity to chat. And this is a fine balance. You want to end on a positive note, but you don't want to be directive, like, let's talk next week, or, something that's so kind of overbearing. You want to be upbeat. I'd love to hear from you. I'd like to continue this conversation. I look forward to hearing more about this opportunity and how I may be a fit for this role, where you can be reached, that kind of thing. You really want to close it on that positive note of why you want to talk to them more about the roles. And just remember, these people, it's hard. They've not met you. They're looking at 2 or 3 pieces of paper to try to determine who you are. So you just want to, do your best to really express that, and express it in a way that's true to who you are. So that's the bottom line. There's nothing to be scared about with these. Just remember that they're going to go off what they can see. So you just want to do everything in your power to give them the most accurate reflection of who you are. So I think I'll end with that. Thank you. It's nice to meet you guys. So.
Thank you so much, Erin. I'll just share my screen real quick to just show you what we're planning to do. So we're just going to work on sections. So again, you can't recycle cover letters every company, but you can work on sections about your strengths, your passions, projects you've been working on, the Sparkbox Apprenticeship, what makes you special. On almost all my cover letters, I have something about me being an English major and doing work in computer science, and how that's like the perfect like conglomeration of my skills. And like I put that in almost every cover letter because it was just like a really good paragraph about me, and it worked in most jobs. So that's what we'll be working on as in pairing sessions. So this will be in the slides as well to help you to work through that. But just to get some sections you can reuse with your cover letters.
Thank you for joining our second session of the Job Preparedness Workshop. Tune in next time for when we bring together a panel of Sparkboxers with diverse experiences to discuss interviewing techniques and the dreaded whiteboard interview, which is common at companies like Google and Amazon. Hope to see you there.